welcome to all of you here in the sanctuary. Welcome to those joining us online today. I see Dee and Sylvia and Laura. My name is Reverend Natasha Eckholm, and it is my joy and pleasure to welcome you to our service this morning, and welcome also to all of those joining us at a later time or on a different platform. There's so many ways to be here. It's really a blessing. So, it is a blessing. Oh, well, thank you, Joyce. I appreciate that. So we're going to get started this morning. We're going to be talking about living wholeheartedly together, and we'll get to that soon. But right now, I want to invite you to join us in our congregational song. And our wonderful musician, Joe Rathburn.
Hey there, thank you. Hi. Morning. Happy day after Juneteenth. That's 2 days after Juneteenth, isn't it? Sorry. I'm 1 day behind. I thought yesterday was the 20th. It was a solstice yesterday. All right, we're going to do your regular Kong song. Sylvia, she's online. Hi, Sylvia. We're waving at you, Sylvia. Yep. So if you all stand. God is my source. God is my power. God gives me everything I need. Well, I give thanks for all my blessings. God gives me everything I need. Love is my source. Love is my power. Love gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings. God gives me everything I need. Peace. Peace is my source. Peace is my power. Peace gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings. Peace gives me everything I need. I'm talking about joy. Joy is my source. Joy is my power. Joy gives me everything I need. So I give thanks for all my blessings. Peace gives me everything I need. God is my source. God is my power. God gives me everything I need. Oh, so I give thanks for all my blessings. God gives me everything I need. Say that one more time. God gives me everything I need.
Okay.
And good morning. Now that we got our energy up, let's bring it back down a little bit. So I just invite you to take these words into silent contemplation. Humanity is this plural and collective unity in which the unity of destination and the differences of destinies are to be understood through each other. Do not follow the ideas of others, but learn to listen to the voice within. Your body and mind will become clear, and you will realize the unity of all things. So, in this moment, right here and right now, I simply recognize and remember the very presence of the divine, that one infinite life, that all intelligence that permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe and experiences and expresses itself as me, as each one of us. I remember who I am, that powerful spiritual being having a human experience. And as I know this truth about myself, I know this for and about each one of us here, and all beings, all sentient beings, are just the expression of the divine. And I'm remembering and knowing that, and just embodying that, and knowing the unity and oneness of all of life, that we are all one, and we are each individualized expressions of the one. And I'm so grateful for this, and I'm grateful that we come together as each one of us in our little personalities and all the things that we are, these expressions of the divine. And we come together as a community, as one. And we just lift each other up. We support one another. I know that there is healing that goes on, that there is joy, that there's abundance, that there's peace, there's wholeness, there's power, there is love. And I'm just so grateful for this time together. I know that Spirit just flows and moves through Reverend Natasha in her talk, and that we are all just made better for being here and participating. I know that Joe's music uplifts and just brings us joy. I know that the technology, Martin and Victoria and everybody that is in service for this service today, sharing their time and their talents. I'm just grateful for it all. And so I just know that this is a divine appointment, a sacred contract that we have with one another, and this day fulfills that agreement that we have, that it was written before the very establishment of time, for there is no time, it's just eternal. And I'm just so grateful for this time together, so I allow it to unfold, knowing it is perfect, whole and complete in divine and right order, declaring it good. I allow it to be, and so it is. And now I believe we'll bring back Joe for a little more music. Bring us back up.
Thank you. Well, convenient that the talk title today has a has a word that's a title of one of my songs. So you've heard it before, but I don't think it ever. I think it bears repeating. So. I'm here to tell you that when the road is filled with trouble up the hills, our pace will double if we walk the road together. And no great weight can be a burden, we can bear it. That's for certain, if we share the load together. There's no challenge that we can't meet, whatever comes our way. Let them send an army and we'll defeat it. There's no retreat, 'cause love can beat it, yeah. So cross the ocean, climb that mountain, and drink our share of life's full fountain, and ooh, we'll do it all together. There's no challenge that we can't meet, whatever comes our way. So let them send an army and we'll defeat it. There's no retreat, 'cause love can beat it, yeah. So we're gonna cross that ocean and climb that mountain and drink our share of life's full fountain. And ooh, let's do it all together. Or we'll take a fall together. We gotta share the joys and the tears, banish all our fears together. Thank you so much.
Wow, Joe, that's just beautiful and so perfect for what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, absolutely. So welcome once again, everyone, to this beautiful Sunday morning here in San Diego. How blessed we are to live in a place with such amazing weather, right? So this year, our theme, Rising Higher, Growing Deeper. This month, our theme, Living in Color, which has sought to explore the diversity of our community, right? Both acknowledging and celebrating that this is Pride Month for LGBTQA+ folks, and also acknowledging and commemorating Juneteenth, right? An important day that recognizes how long it took for the news of freedom to actually get across our country, right? So it's really interesting. We're not celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation, right, when it actually was official, but how it took 2 years for everybody to get to hear about that. And as we know, Juneteenth was something that started in Texas because it took that long for that news to get there. So part of what this month offers us the opportunity to do is both celebrate our diversity, but also to celebrate our unity in that diversity. And we're going to talk more about this idea of unity and togetherness today. And one of the things we're going to do is to look at it through the lens of vulnerability, kind of recognizing that divine connection that we have often requires vulnerability. Is that, am I the only one, or is this word one that's a little uncomfortable, right? Does anybody like being vulnerable? No, I don't. So I want to acknowledge that because it's not easy to talk about the things that make us feel vulnerable. I think it's pretty natural as human beings for us to want to avoid discomfort, and vulnerability often brings discomfort, right? But what this also creates the opportunity for is for us to be courageous in addressing those feelings, and to recognize that while we may not always agree, we have this opportunity through all the challenges that arise when we don't agree about things to practice learning how to regulate our emotions, for example, to practice healing trauma, and to practice advocating for ourselves and other people, and how important that is. Different definitions can lead to conflict, but what's important about that is the opportunity for discussion, for dialogue, for exploration, that ultimately can bring us to a greater state and condition and experience of unity, of unity with God, with the divine, with ourselves, and with each other. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines to be vulnerable as to be open to attack or damage. Oh, that doesn't sound very good, does it? But one thing we can recognize about that state is that we have to be open, right? When we are vulnerable, we are open. Yeah. Brené Brown, who has written extensively about vulnerability and shame, defines vulnerability this way. She says, to me, vulnerability is courage. I think I have a slide here. It's about the willingness to show up and be seen in our lives, and in those moments when we show up, I think those are the most powerful, meaning-making moments of our lives, even if they don't go well. I think they define who we are. How many of us judge success by how well things go? Well, apparently AI has an opinion about that. Okay. Let's ask that question again. How many of us define success by how well things go? Well, I think a lot of us, right? We think that success is when everything is perfect, right? When everything works. And what we forget sometimes is that success can be growth. So even if it doesn't seem like something went well in the moment, there is growth happening. There's growth happening in the moment, and there's growth happening moving forward as we reflect, right? As we think about what we have learned from a particular experience. She goes on to say, vulnerability is the core, the heart, and the center of meaningful human experience, which is a very powerful statement, I think. And I will tell you a funny story in a few minutes about why it seemed even funnier to me, because I'm going to share a moment of my own vulnerability in preparing this talk. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist teacher who I have great admiration and respect for, also says vulnerability is the gateway to compassion and understanding. Right? You have to be willing to be vulnerable to be able to connect with others. Right? And that's hard sometimes, isn't it? Yeah. So in preparing for today, I wondered what Ernest Holmes had to say about vulnerability and courage. So I looked in the index of the Science of Mind textbook, and I also looked in the concordance, which is kind of an expanded index that was produced after the book was published. And what's interesting is that neither word appears in either one. So I think we can perhaps imagine that vulnerability was not something that was discussed that much earlier in the 20th century. It's probably a little bit more contemporary and more recent. What he does comment about is the word open, which appears 5 times, and the word unity, which appears 63. So we know that unity was an important concept for him. But I wanted to share something he said about being open. He said, I know I am now at the threshold of good, wisdom, and truth. All the good I can embody is now mine. I have only to open the petals of my soul and accept that which is ready to express through me. I love this image, petals of my soul. Right? To me, it is such a beautiful image, but it's also very dynamic. Right? Petals open. We can allow ourselves to open into this state where things can be expressed through us, where we can embody the good that we desire to experience, where we can embody all of the good that is the divine, where we can embody love and peace and abundance and joy. All of those things require us to open our souls. And oops, yeah, that means we must be vulnerable when that happens, right? This also kind of engages us with that idea of giving and receiving, right? We cannot give unless we open, and we cannot receive unless we're open. And so we come to the question of choice, right? We are always, in every moment, every breath, every step, at the moment of choice. Do we choose to be open, or do we choose not to be open right now? So, as we've been talking about, vulnerability is uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable, and it feels challenging, and hey, if I can avoid that, let me do that. And I will share that, in my younger life, you might have described me as an armadillo. Somebody who was ready to curl up in the corner to avoid any possible injury, right? I was afraid of the criticism of others. I was afraid of not doing things right. I was afraid of getting hurt. And so it was easier to avoid. In fact, I used to call, in my own mind, I didn't say this out loud, I used to call myself a professional wallflower because it was safe. It was safer to be there. Nobody was going to notice me, all right? But that also limited my experience of life, right? Because I wasn't able to be open and express myself, or really to engage with other people in a rich and full dialogue. The truth is, it was lonely in that safe place, right? Powerful healing occurs when we have the courage to embrace our vulnerability. And our intuition can guide us through initiating and participating in those conversations. So I want to share my vulnerable experience preparing for today's talk. So as you all know, in CSL, our leadership, our national leadership, sends us material for the weekly talks that we give. And we have choice about if we want to use it at all or just use part of it. And in this week's material was a passage from The Color Purple. I'm not going to read it out loud because it's in an idiom that I cannot pronounce with confidence or respect. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with that? If I sort of mispronounce that, I'm afraid it's going to be seen as disrespectful, or I'm just going to, slaughter it. It's going to be the worst thing ever. And I kind of, walked around for a little while, sort of chewing on my insecurity, my own anxiety, and my own fear of being vulnerable and making a mistake, right? And they had also provided a sort of translated version, for lack of a better way to put that. And I thought, well, maybe I should read that, but that just sort of seemed to, I don't know, that didn't sit quite right either. I share all of this to say that the point of this passage is to talk about both growth in a person and acknowledgement and recognition of how some people have been very poorly treated. And for those of you, how many people are familiar with the novel, The Color Purple, or the movie? Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few people, right? So, as you know, part of the story is that the main character, who in the film, or the first film anyway, was played by Whoopi Goldberg, is raised by an abusive father, and then she's married off to an abusive man, and she suffers a great deal. And this man, her husband that she's married to, is in love with somebody else. And that somebody else eventually comes and stays with them, and Whoopi Goldberg's character and that somebody else, a woman, fall in love. And that's part of the complicated story. But what is happening in this passage is that the husband is acknowledging that part of the reason he beat the Whoopi Goldberg character, his wife, was because she was not that other person that he loved. And all of that is simply to say, it's sort of looking at the the issues of how we treat each other, how we see our wholeness or lack of wholeness. And I wanted to share that story so you could see that I'm struggling, like everybody else, I have my moments of struggling with my own vulnerability. And so I wanted to share that to you. This is not a sort of abstract, hey, you guys out there. This is, we're all in the vulnerable boat together, right? And I invite you to look at the book and page 269, where you will see this passage, because I'm not going to read it out loud. But I think we all wrestle with this idea of right? Are we doing things right? Are other people doing things right? We have a very binary culture in a lot of ways, right? We're always wrestling sort of with that binary and what it means and how we live with it. And sometimes it really feels like, well, there can only be one right or one wrong, right? And the idea here is not to say that there isn't right and wrong per se. We all must determine, according to our values, according to our idea of sort of the moral compass that we live with, what is right for us. And the invitation really is to be in dialogue about what is right for both ourselves and other people. Can we come together in a sense of not, I don't want to say, sort of compromise so much as looking for those things that bring us together, that support our collective wholeness, right? And there's a lot about the values of our country, for example, that have raised us up. We haven't always lived up to them, right? That is our ongoing project. But the values themselves are very beautiful, right? Life, liberty, the pursuit of freedom, all those things. So what often happens, or I certainly experience this, is, we kind of avoid people who make us feel uncomfortable or who we're afraid of or who are really different from us, because it takes a lot of energy, not to mention risk, right, in dealing with that vulnerability. And yet, when we don't engage with people, we lose the opportunity to create a greater wholeness for our own experience because we have expressed what is most important to us, and we lose the opportunity to support that experience of connection and wholeness in others. So what are some of the kinds of things we can do to support ourselves? And I'm not suggesting that we should put ourselves at risk, right? That's not really the point of this. We need to have boundaries. We need to feel safe. But how do we feel safe? Is avoidance the only way to feel safe? Can we feel safe or safer by using our breath to stay calm, to remember that love is within us, for example? Can we feel safer by being gentle with ourselves, by giving ourselves grace and giving other people grace, right? Can we feel safer by trusting our intuition to guide us in difficult conversations? When we can use some of these different tools, I think we will be in a better place to have some of those difficult conversations that we need to have. So while we may not always agree with each other, I want to encourage all of us, myself included, to strive to practice unconditional love and acceptance by being present as we can be in all of our interactions with other people. One thing I think we all observe in life, and sadly this is still our reality in many instances, but that marginalized people are often not treated as fully human beings. And that's in many different kinds of contexts, whether we're talking about people who are unhoused, whether we're talking about people in marginalized communities, Black and brown people, immigrants. There's an endless list of others, as we are very good in our society at othering people. But it's really important, I'm just going to affirm that as a value I hold, to choose to practice that unconditional love and acceptance and to look for opportunities for that dialogue. I want to share a Rumi quote. I have no idea if Rumi who actually said all these things, but he's wonderful to quote all the time. So Rumi, of course, is that poet of the Middle East from the, I think it's the 16th century, something like that. Anyway, he said, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, and I will meet you there. Wow. I really love this idea, right? I don't have to be planted in my idea of right and wrong in every moment, right? Because I hold that there, so I'm not going to fall over. I can go to this other place and meet you there. And I'm going to share that. I love this quote because I was talking with my husband last night about the talk, and he reminded me of something that he and I do, but is also something that he taught me. And that was when we were first married 11 years ago, we had agreement about a lot of things, but, we also had disagreement. And he used to call those experiences of disagreement growing together pains. Right? So we think about how we talk about growing pains, right, in our youth, right? As we're growing to adulthood, we experience these physical pains in our bodies. But in our lives, right, in our interactions with others, we also experience that kind of stretch, right? The growing, in our case, stretching towards each other, growing together pains. And I love that phrase, and I love this because we were meeting out there in that field, doing our growing together pains. So I appreciate his willingness to let me share that story with you. So in chapter 3 of The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes writes, there is one spirit, one mind, one substance, and that one is manifesting in and through all creation, but not absorbed by its creation. And I'm sure that many of you have heard this phrase, or there's another iteration of it that is part of our statement, Declaration of Principles. But the really essential piece of that is that there is only one. And that one is us, that one is me, that one is you, and all of them, all the thems that are out there, right? How would the world transform if we truly saw the divinity in each and every one of us, right? There is ultimately no us and them, ever, anywhere. We are all one because the divine has chosen to express itself as each of us. I don't know how it keeps us all straight. There's an awful lot of us, but yes, that is our belief. That is our faith, that we are all the divine in expression. And if that is true, then we are all one, and there is no alternative but to recognize that. Even when that one doesn't look like me, even when that one doesn't sound like me, even when that one is doing something that, oh my God, I would never do that, right? We are still that one, all together. And that presence of love, that is the one, that is God, that is the divine, is expressing itself through us in each and every moment. And we can choose to recognize it and act in accordance of it. We can ignore it. But I think we do so to our detriment and to the detriment of everyone around us. Ernest Holmes noted in his Sermon by the Sea that strength comes from choosing to be for something, right? So this whole question of how we engage with each other really comes down to choosing, right? To choosing to be for something. So we have the opportunity to express our beliefs and our principles, and we have the choice to listen to others, to engage with them, to interact with them in finding our common ground, in finding how we can live together. This is the basis of projects like the restorative justice projects. One of the most famous that I'm sure you are all familiar with is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa that was held in the 1990s, which was led by Bishop Desmond Tutu. and the object of which was to create a space where people who had been injured by apartheid, right, could make their statements, could bear witness to their experience, and where also perpetrators could speak to that and seek forgiveness, right? In the, was it a perfect, was it all rosy and easy? No, it was difficult. There was struggle. There was unhappiness. But there was also sharing, there was statements, there was a lot that happened. And a very similar kind of commission is happening in Canada right now with respect to the experience of Indigenous peoples in the boarding school system that was very brutal. And there is a dialogue and discussion going on now with those Native communities and with the clergy of many of the schools that were involved in that. And all of that is to say is it's vulnerable, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult, and it's healing. All of those things together. Bishop Tutu used the term Ubuntu, which is this idea that we are all connected as a human family. That's as I understand it, a philosophy that's found across many African cultures, right? Sort of the oneness and the differentness. The oneness and difference, let's see. So in chaplaincy, we talk about an idea called the ministry of presence. And this is the idea that part of what a chaplain is doing is creating a safe and sacred space for patients to be able to talk about, and I say patients because I work in a medical context, but for patients or individuals to be able to talk about both their feelings and their deepest concerns and worries. And today, I want to invite us to think about not only creating safe space, but to create what Brené Brown calls brave space, right? And brave space, again, is something that requires a willingness to be open, a willingness to be vulnerable. So she describes it as a space for healing conversations in our community. And it's not about being comfortable, but it's about engaging deeply in order to foster understanding and connection. So I want to invite us this week to think about what we might be able to do in the project of creating brave space together, whether it is in our personal lives, here at home, out in your workplace, wherever you engage with people, which is virtually everywhere, right? So here are some tools for creating brave space. So one of them is to just model vulnerability. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to provide a lecture to everyone around you, but the invitation is to express your feelings or share a story, to name something that is important to you, right? Because when you embody that vulnerability, when you embody that openness, maybe we can just use the word openness instead of vulnerability. When you embody that, that's also an invitation for other people to do the same. Another is perspective taking. Can we sort of suspend our point of view long enough to just think about the point of view of other people? That doesn't have to mean saying they're right and you're wrong. It just means expanding, stretching, perhaps experiencing some growing together pains. Embrace your fear, or at least acknowledge it, right? And if you feel fear, right, fear is a signal, right? Maybe be curious. What is that fear about right now? Is that fear about what is happening right now? Is that fear about the conversation that you're happening? Is that fear about something that happened when you were 5 or 10 or 20? Is it possible you have more tools now to deal with whatever that is kind of triggering or sparking that feeling? Use your critical thinking, right? We all have it. Which just means to stay open to questioning, right? To perhaps invite questions for yourself and to see if it's okay to ask questions of other people. Think about your intentions. And a part of what's really important about intentions is the idea that our intentions help us to set boundaries, right? They help us to understand sort of what are the limits in this moment, in this conversation, in this interaction. And then finally, practice mindfulness. And all that this does not mean sit down and do a meditation every time you want to talk to somebody, but it just means to be in the moment as much as you can be, to be present in your body, to be present with your feelings, and to allow yourself, as much as you are able, to be present with the feelings of others, right? As much as it seems reasonable to do so with the boundaries that you have set for yourself, right? So a world that truly works for everyone is something that begins with our collective effort to be open and honest and compassionate, to live wholeheartedly. So our invitation this week is to let's commit to that transformative journey together, right? You don't have to do it by yourself. That's kind of the whole point, that we're doing it together. And be part of a movement that welcomes courageous conversations and embraces a path to greater unity together. So this was where I was going to stop. And I've been thinking this morning about kind of what might be a little bit of the elephant in the room for many of us. And that's what happened yesterday when the United States bombed Iran and engaged with the conflict that has been going on there for some time. That's a frightening moment. And it is also frightening that we don't know what's going to happen next. And that's just the reality of the moment. So I wanted to name this because I know that this is on the minds of many of us. Part of the part of the challenge, the opportunity, the journey that we experience in Science of Mind is how we integrate the principles and the beliefs that we have with how we live in the world, right? And we live in the world not only as individuals, but also as communities. So I want to close today by offering a prayer for peace and inviting all of us to allow that peace, that is God, that is the divine within us, to be expressing itself through us right now. So please join me in the light. Simply taking this moment to recognize the presence of the One, of Source, of infinite divine intelligence, of love, the love that is the absolute source of all. I speak this word to recognize that presence within me, around me, through me, flowing in every moment into expression. I recognize the good that is God, and I recognize in that good love and peace and power and joy, everything that we understand that is good. I know that I am an expression of that love and that peace, and I know this is the truth for absolutely every being on the planet, for every person gathered here in this room, for every person joining us from somewhere else, and ultimately for every being on the planet. We are all one in our union with Source. There is no separation. And I speak this word this morning simply to know that peace. That peace is flowing through me. I see that peace in each and every person that I encounter. I know that in the all-knowing mind of God, there is only peace. And I know that peace guides each and every human being. That peace impels each and every one of us to correct action. I know that peace that that wisdom, that is divine, knows absolutely what needs to be done, what the solution to any problem is, what is needed to bring about that collective experience of unity and oneness and wholeness. And so I know that that is already in motion now, that that is happening in this very moment, that as I speak these words into the law, it is already done. And all that is required of us is simply to be open, to say yes, to accept that peace within us and to receive the peace as it returns to us, pressed down and multiply. I am so grateful to know the peace that is the divine, that is God, that is Source. And I am so grateful to know it together in this community. And so I simply release this word with a sense of calm, with a sense of confidence, with a sense of all is well now, and invite you to join me in saying, and so it is. All right. Thank you.